anyone who's pursuing an English degree, or if you're an art student in general, there's a certain stigma surrounding that is completely unfair. And depending on where you're from and your family's outlook on this, I spent a number of years, and even to this day, I have some family members who are like, "What are you going to do when you grow up? And when are you gonna get a real job?" Uh, and so when you're getting English degrees, and people have this idea that you're just spending your time in books all day, and I don't know, they think you're gonna read some old scrolls for them, or but they don't really quite understand that we're learning how to read between the lines. We're learning about subtext. We're learning about communication. We're learning about uh, people. And I thought this might slow down as I got a little bit older, and I'd have to stop justifying my discipline. And again, in the before times when New Year's Eve parties were just something you just went to and you didn't think about if they were safe to go to, and all those types of things. Uh, if the English profs arrive, there's a lineup of people who want to talk to you about how you like ruined their university experience, or their kids are going into a class and English 100 is really, really hard, and why can't you ease up on these poor students? They also worry that you're going to correct their grammar or vocabulary. They'll relish the opportunity to point out that you misspoke. So there's this weird trauma or grudge that some English teacher long ago uh, was a barrier to their success or happiness for even just a little bit of a while. Like they had to analyze a poem, or think about why they feel something, or explain why they're right when they're making an argument. And I always find this very funny because I'm not very good at math, but I don't meet a physics teacher and unload on the horrible experience I had in high school physics class or something. And I'm always telling students about this. There's something about writing, and there's something about an English class that is very personal, and it's something that when I was at the Student Success Center, people didn't. There'd be a math tutor right next door, and people would walk in the math tutor and like happily just throw their homework down and say, "I'm bad at math, help me." And people would come into the little writing cubicle and like clutch their work to their chest, and they're really like apologetic, like, "I'm sorry you have to read this." And it was very something deeply personal. And I've always been trying to, in my teaching, try to make that experience for students better, right? With more constructive feedback, and just adopting some of there's something we call the WISE method of giving feedback, where you explain to somebody that your standards are high, but that you believe in them, and that you'll do whatever you can to help them succeed. And it typically works. And I think a lot of times people's experience with their English classes, of course, uh, is a negative one for different reasons. This is Morse, like the code, and he is sort of like the guest star in all of my classes. So it makes sense that he's here today too. So I'm trying to change that image. Like your English profs probably not that bad. I think there's a sort of shift, a new wave of thinking about how to teach writing. People trying different techniques. We're trying to even at Luther said, like I said, writing across the disciplines. We're trying to even empower instructors who will say, like, they're good writers and they know good writing when they see it, but we're trying to get them the tools so that they can respond to students in ways where they're developing new assignments, and they're giving that feedback in a way that might inspire instead of make people feel bad about it. Because it doesn't get easier. Even when I send something off and I get feedback on my writing, there's something just about it, like I said, that's personal, that I'm still trying to figure out. Part of my teaching is also related to, and my research is related to, masculinity studies. And I think this may have been started by, number one, when I was an English student, and I think to this day, the ratio of men to women, English classes like really lean more to being like higher women in those classes. Uh, and so I was always surrounded by really smart women, and my mom was always in charge of, like, my dad was in the military, and he was not a sort of typical like kind of overbearing drill sergeant of sorts. But it was like I always saw my mom calling the shots, and it was always, confirm with your mom, because my dad didn't want to like contradict her. And a lot of the books that I talk about, and a lot of the way that some of the research I do is rooted in trying to figure out like some of these gender expectations we have in our society, and how can we get men to become aware of some of those factors, and maybe improve their behavior in certain ways. Comment in the chat here. I like how you mentioned that writing can be very personal. I think people are often scared to show their work because it's something that came right from their mind. Good. And so in a way, it's like looking into their mind. And if you don't like what you're reading, it's sort of like a character judgment of how they think. Thank you for that comment. I think that's exactly it. I think with math, it seems like there's maybe one answer, but different ways to get the answer. But in writing, it always seems like it's very subjective, and that it's some sort of magic, and I tried in my teaching of writing to break it down into like a formulaic style almost, but also to embrace some like creativity there, and give people options. I think that's right. I think it's a character assassination. There's a sort of like shame that's associated with it that I'm going to try to keep improving, because you never want to make somebody feel bad when you're giving feedback, and I always have to try to explain that it's about the writing and what's on the page, and not someone's effort or their character. Other things about reading, writing, why English. If I'm telling students who really like English classes, but their parents are a little bit hesitant about it, or they're wondering later about their job prospects, I think English is about understanding people and why they do what they do. A colleague of mine always says that we're able to, in books and other types of literature, we can experience other people's lives and some traumatic situations sometimes in spaces where the edges are rounded, not sharp. So in real life, some of these things you encounter might be really quite painful, but if you can live vicariously through characters in books and figure out that the outcome of that situation will be okay, or if it's not, that grieving, moving on from that, learning from that experience can be useful. So we see those suffering and successes of others. We learn from their victories and failures, their struggles and perseverance, so that we can thrive. I teach illness narratives in one of my 110 classes. So we talk about people overcoming illnesses, or coping with loss, or living with disability. And I think in learning these experiences, we're really talking about learning empathy, learning about groups of people and situations you're not usually exposed to is crucial, I think. And I think we're seeing a lot where people are not listening to different groups of people, or if we are interacting with them, we're doing it in a very kind of superficial way. And I think being able to read about these experiences, or watch documentaries about these things, or whatever it is. Even I was talking about Crown Lands earlier, like a great band, and one that if you're listening to the songs and you're reading the lyrics, you're learning about Indigenous culture, but you're also learning about those two guys and their personal experience. So stories humanize all kinds of people from all different types of backgrounds. Like I said, I do this illness narratives class, and There's a lot of memoirs in those classes where people are learning about like The Diving Bell and the Butterfly is one book, a great film about a guy who has a stroke and he has locked in syndrome. So he can basically move one eye, and he blinked a book. And so my students learn about the resilience and hardiness it takes to overcome that sort of situation, to write that book. They basically practice using the system of blinking the alphabet in class to answer some discussion questions, and are completely exhausted when they're done, which gives them some understanding of Bowlby's situation. And I often tie that with engaged learning components. Like I used to be able to, and we're going to do this as soon as we're able to safely, get students volunteering at Wascana Rehab again and some other health facilities around the city. So they're getting this experience volunteering with people who have suffered strokes. They're reading about it in class, and the essay quality just goes through the roof, right? They really appreciate more what the author of that book's real life experience was like. And sometimes my students are always asking, I teach English 100 and 110 primarily, and I teach an English science bundle. I've taught a pre-nursing bundle. I also teach a journalism and justice bundle. So 3 professional students coming into Luther. If you're looking for first year English classes, those bundles are really good, really strong cohorts of people with those kind of interests. And even in the English science one, for example, we're still talking about fiction. And we do that not because, I mean, sometimes it's nice, but I always say, like, we're not shedding a single tear over like a beautifully crafted line or that sort of thing. But we're learning, because fiction authors don't come right out and say what motivates their characters. We're learning to diagnose their problems and figure out, like, why do they act the way they do? What causes their problems? And we don't always get that in real life, right? Even if someone provides that information, that doesn't mean it's genuine or correct. And so it can help you in those interpersonal relationships when people are talking about different things. And it's like, it's not really adding up. Testing those ideas out in literature is really important. You know, we need to be able to read between the lines in terms of our personal relationships or work relationships. We need to do this in terms of being a citizen, listening to politicians and other authority figures. You'll see people all the time say, like, that's not what they said. Or like, where are you getting that they're, you know, this political leader wants to make these following changes? And it's like, well, here's like all the subtext, and here's the language that other leaders have used in other situations where that's what's coming. I think we're losing this a little bit. I think on the one hand, people are good at, for example, understanding the joke behind a meme, but they'll watch a movie that is clearly satire and not quite get it. I mean, you'll see some people talking about that movie that's on Netflix, Don't Look Up. And some people are like, I didn't really get this. And it's like, well, it's like mocking this very current situation that we have. Like it's over the top and absurd in a way that it's trying to critique this and warn us against it. And if you're not reading it through an ironic, satirical lens, it can just kind of be excruciating to watch, and someone might turn it off. And so the reading part in that way, learning to read between the lines, learning to think about seeing patterns and what people say. You're doing this in some of your classes with your profs, what they want in their assignments. You're making connections between all the different classes you're taking. You're building this understanding of the world and the different texts that you're exposed to. And so that's the reading side I think is valuable. Then the writing side too, being able to turn your frustrations with some of the problems we see in the world into solutions is something that I've talked to my students about a lot.